Bienvenido amigos and welcome to the Great American Southwest. I'm Norm Morrison and this is the Santa Fe Report. Thank you for being here. I'm going to talk about a subject today that gave me a little pause when I first started thinking about it. And I was really debating whether or not to talk about this or not, but I decided it was important and that people need to be aware of what's going on in our society. And what I'm going to be speaking about tonight is depression. People suffer from depression, obviously, the world over, but I think it's particularly prevalent because of our lifestyle and expectations. And people suffer from various degrees. Some very depressed, some moderately, and some at a level that I don't think they even realize as being depression. Now, I'm going to be speaking about my personal experience, and that's obviously all that I can speak to. In February of 2010, I started to realize that I was getting depressed. And for a while before that, I had recognized that I wasn't feeling my usual self, but I didn't attribute it as depression. But in fact, that's what it was. And I suspect that at least a low level of depression had been going on for many months before I even recognized what it was. And as time went on, over the next couple of months, I just kept sinking lower and lower and lower until one Saturday evening in April of 2010, I got to a place that was so low, I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about myself, I didn't care about life, I didn't care about anything. And looking back on it, it was a very scary period. Although I didn't feel that way at the time. And what was so scary was that I didn't care about anything. And quite frankly, death would have been welcome. And I had no fear of death. One little thought came to me that was enough of a shift that it made me reconsider. And I don't know that I was suicidal, but I was probably pretty close. And what happened was, my daughter came to mind. And I thought to myself, I don't want my daughter to go through the rest of her life without her dad. And I wanted to see what became of my daughter. I wanted to see what she grew up to be. And she was already a young lady, but I wanted to see what she did with her life. And that was enough to keep me from doing anything more drastic. So I went to bed. Woke up the next morning and I was just lying in bed wondering how I was feeling. And I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if I was feeling bad or if I was feeling good or neutral or whatever. So I decided to get up and I went out and put my coffee on. And as I was making my coffee, I put a little extra coffee in the coffee filter. And while that may seem completely insignificant, to me it really wasn't. And I'll tell you why. A few minutes later, my coffee's made, and I pour myself a cup. And I took a sip, and that coffee tasted so good that it brought a smile to my face. And like that, everything shifted. There was a complete turnaround, a complete about face. And I cannot explain what happened. Probably wasn't the coffee, it was probably the smile that it put in my face and just somehow shifted my attitude. I didn't go completely back to what I would call the regular Norm Morrison for a period of time. So after a couple of weeks went by, I started taking St. John's wort, which is a medicinal herb that has properties that supposedly alter moods. I started taking that, and after probably a week or maybe a week and a half, I started to notice that I was feeling increasingly better. So I kept on taking St. John's wort for probably a month and a half or 2 months. And I decided to see how I was feeling, so I quit taking it. But after a couple of days of being off the St. John's wort, I noticed myself starting to slip downward again. So I'd go back on it. So over the course of the next 6 months or so, periodically I would take myself off the St. John's wort, and after a couple of days of being off it, I would notice that I was starting to slip again. And all told, I was probably on the St. John's wort for 8, 9, 10 months. I don't remember exactly. But at some point I quit, and I was no longer slipping. I was back to my old self again, and I wasn't needing the aid of any sort of pharmaceutical or herbaceutical. But it really does scare me to look back on that event and recognize that I could have done something drastic because I didn't care. And that's what happens with depression. You stop caring about everything. You don't care about yourself, you don't care about life, you don't care about anything. And I had many, many friends I could have reached out to. So I'm relating this to you so that if you ever recognize one of your friends, one of your loved ones, anyone you know is in a very severe depression, you need to reach out to them, because they probably won't reach out to you. Be aware of what's happening in the lives of the people you love. If they look like they need help, give them some help. Reach out. Do whatever needs to be done. I'm Norm Morrison. This is the Santa Fe Report. See you next time.